Hello everyone and welcome to another video in this channel. My name is Abraham Leal and today we're going to continue with our little gift right here. If you guys remember yesterday, and we had quite a bit of a success with this series. People seem to like it. Thank you very much for the support in the comments. That's one of the motivators that I get from uploading this sort of stuff. Like knowing that you guys like this stuff, it's always a really good reinforcement, and it allows me to keep myself motivated and show you amazing stuffs here in the channel. So yeah, in yesterday's video we talked a little bit about rigging. And if you guys remember, we did this rig. It's a very simple rig. It's a translation rig with the main curve right here. And well, in this case, the main curve is down there. And it's a squash rig right here. So it's just the squash nonlinear deformer that we have assigned to the object. And we connected the curve to that squash modifier. I was thinking about doing something else. And if you take a look at this, the squash handle actually like modifies how we see it. So if I were to move this thing down and I go into the squash curve, there we go, and we squash this, the result that we get is slightly different. And not only that, we can actually animate the position of the squash, as you can see right there, and we could create some interesting things as well. So I thought, hey, why not also create a modifier. Let's get it right there. Why not also allow the curve modifier, this one, to move that handle so that we can like move things around? Or even better, why not create another, like an extra handle that's gonna be the squash movement? So I'm gonna have like this smaller like element on the inside of the object. Let's go to the top view. Seems to be off center. Is this one? Yeah. Translate this back to 0. There we go. So this curve right here is going to be my squash movement, so that I can move that squash and stretch. It's going to add a little bit more, rigging elements to the whole thing, but I think it's going to be a good idea. And by the way, someone mentioned yesterday that rigging is a difficult thing, and yes, it's a difficult thing, but we actually have a very cool rigging course that you can find in Skillshare.
Hey guys, Abraham here. I just want to remind you guys that we upload all of our courses to Skillshare. Skillshare is this amazing site where you can access a ton of different content to learn, improve, and grow as an artist. We have all of our courses available to watch and learn from right now in Skillshare. You can check the description down here, and Skillshare is offering 1 free month trial to their premium membership. With this membership, you're going to be able to access all of our courses and watch and learn all of the amazing things that we cover with all of the softwares. So, what are you waiting for? Check Skillshare down here below.
There we go. So I'm actually really proud about that rigging course. It's been one of our best sellers, I think, in the last year and a little bit, because it covers a lot of the basic stuff. So if you're interested in rigging, try out the Skillshare thing. It's gonna be free, and you're gonna learn a lot about rigging. So this is gonna be my squash movement. This is gonna be parented to this curve. So wherever the main curve goes, everything is gonna follow, or this curve actually. But this one, I'm going to be able to move and modify the squash and stretch. So how are we going to be able to do that, you might ask? Well, that's a great question. We need to expose the location and translation of the squash handle. So easiest way to do this is just grab this thing right here and parent it to this guy right here. So now if I select this curve right here and I move it, I'm going to be moving the squash handle. And then if I go here to the squash and I move the squash, as you can see, the squash is doing something weird because it needs to be right there. Look at that. Okay, so we can create some interesting animations. And this is like pretty much the reason why rigging is so important. Because with rigging, if you do the rigging properly, then it is fairly easy to create complex things that would be pretty much impossible to do with traditional just like transformation, rotations, and scale. So by combining the hierarchy and by combining the elements, we can create cool looking elements. So that's it. We got this. Now I'm going to go here, panels, look through selected, and let's find our main shot. So I think our main shot is going to be right around here. And as I mentioned, it's just like a 5-second ad, right? Like ads in social media, even like the ad here, this one right here. That's just like a very short ad, 2-3 seconds, 4 or 5 maybe, depending on the complexity of things. And that's it, because you want to keep people's attentions, right? And you want to just go straight into the product or whatever. So I think for this one, we're going to do 4-second animation. By default, inside of Maya, animation is done at 24 frames per second. And more often than not, that's going to be the number that you're going to be working with. you can have a display that has like 60 hertz or 144 hertz. Like doesn't matter if you do 24 frames per second, you're gonna see like a fluid animation. So if we multiply 24 times 4, it's 96. So I'm gonna write down 96 down here, and now my time range right here has 96 frames. So the way animation works is we create key poses, or we create like special moments throughout the timeline, and then we play around with how we go from point A to point B. We also have an animation course, by the way, if we want to check it out. So in here, I want to like first of all, I want to use my big curve right here to mark where the main poses are gonna be. So I know that probably about the 70 like frame mark, this is going to be the last shot I'm going to see from my gift. And then from this shot, the gift is going to kind of like shoot forward towards us, or we might even move the camera towards the gift. Okay, now I also know that in the first frame we're actually not going to see the gift. I'm going to say panels tier off copy. It's going to give me another copy of my this perspective view so that I can work on perspective here and see the result over here. Make sure not to move the camera over here. So in this one, I'm gonna move it up like this. So in the first frame, frame 0, the gift is gonna be up there. And then the gift is gonna fall down until it hits frame 70. And then it's probably gonna go forward, or again, the camera is gonna go in. I think the camera going in might be a better idea. So I don't want this to fall like super slow. I probably want this to fall in like 10 frames or so. So I'm gonna bring this down, and the gift is going to touch the ground right around there with 10 frames. So in a matter of 10 frames, the gift is going to fall, as you can see right there. Now, if you want to see this updating on both sides, you can actually see that. You can go to preferences, and then it's on the here. Where is it? Here, update view all, and just save. So that way, if I scroll, you're going to see the movement on both. There we go. So the gift is going to fall down. There's, of course, going to be a little bit of squash and stretch. That's why we added the whole thing. But at the same time, once it falls down, or as it's falling down, I would like the gift to rotate a little bit, okay? Now, we can decide what type of rotation looks better. We can do clockwise rotation or counterclockwise rotation by, like, mental standard, like culturally. Whenever we see certain directions, we think about positive things, and when we see other directions, we think about negative things. So that's why when you see a character, like I'm gonna do full screen right now, when you see a character on the scene and you want him to be looking towards the future, towards the goal, he goes like this, okay? Seeing to your right, should be your right, to that side of the screen. If you see the character looking back, it looks like it's looking back, even though there's like no really like a back and front, right? It looks like I'm looking back because I'm looking to the left side of the screen, which is this area right here. The same thing happens with rotations. When you have an object and it's rotating, if it rotates like this, for you right now on the screen, it's looking counterclockwise, okay? It's looking like it's rotating at the opposite side of the clock. And if I do this, it looks like it's rotating forward, right? Even though there's like no specific rotation, it's just how our minds work. Sorry. So that same thing can apply here. If we rotate this guy, we rotate the big curve, we're gonna rotate the big curve, and we do this, it looks positive. It looks like it's rotating to a positive side. And if we do this, it looks, I'm not gonna say negative, but it just looks a little bit weird. So what I'm gonna do is here, starting on frame 10, or actually starting on frame 0, we're gonna have this rotation, and then by frame 70, which is the final part of our animation, this thing is gonna have, it's gonna rotate, I would say maybe like a full like circle, 360 degrees, or a little bit more than 360 degrees, something like this. Okay, so now as you can see, this is what we're gonna be seeing. So as it falls down, it's already rotating a little bit, and then it falls down, it squashes, it keeps on like bounce, it's gonna keep on bouncing a little bit, it's gonna keep rotating like this, and then in frame 70, I think here the animation should be the camera. So I'm gonna select the camera on this view right here. I'm gonna add a keyframe pressing S to the camera, and then it's gonna be a really fast movement, so probably like 10 frames or so. We're gonna go like really in like this, okay? Of course, we're gonna use a fade and stuff, but we're gonna go in like this, okay? So what's gonna happen is this. If I hit play, boop, okay? We're gonna get this sort of effect. Now, it might not be a bad idea. Well, first of all, you can see that this thing is running really, really fast. Again, on the preference options, we need to change this to 24 frames times 1 so that it only runs at that. This blue thing right here, it's called the what's the word? It's called the playback thing. It's supposed to like speed up the playback process so that you can see it in real time. It's very important that we see things in real time. So I'm gonna say display, heads up display, and then frame count, frame rate. There we go. And on the bottom corner here, as long as you see this running at least 24 frames per second, then that means that's fine. If you want to limit it, you can go play every frame and then max playback 24 frames per second. You can see it's gonna. That's really weird. It's going all the way to 40 frames, but that's fine. As long as it's above 24 frames per second, you should see it just fine. So this is what we're seeing. I like it. I think it's an interesting idea. Of course, we're missing the little jiggly thing right now. It looks very very static. I do think it's a little bit long. So at this point, I think it's a little bit long. So I'm gonna select the camera, and I want the camera to go in earlier. So by frame 70, which is when the rotation stops, that's when the fade is gonna go, and that's what you see like the brand or like the product or something. So it's just gonna be like 3.5 seconds, right? So this is what we're gonna see. There we go. So that's my timing right now. Doesn't mean that we can't change the timing later on. And that's one of the things that people struggle quite a bit with animation. They think that once it's not like modeling. It's a little bit more flexible. So even though we have a rough understanding of how we want things to be, we can always change them later on. So let's go back to our frames, and now let's think about the bounciness of the gift. So we need to decide: do we want the box to land and then jump a little bit and then land again and do the little squishy, or do we just want it to land and do the squishy like a jello thing? Well, it's up to us, right? In this case, I think we're gonna go with just a landing, like staying right there and doing the jiggly thing. Okay. So if we go to the frame where it touches the ground, which is frame 10, normally things go through a process called stretch and squash. It happens to even to us as humans, not in a cartoony way, but there's always like compression and extension of our bodies. So at this point, the GIF is falling down. So we would expect to see this GIF stretched. Okay. So I'm gonna go to my thing right here, to my squash control. On frame 0, I'm gonna hit S to animate that squash slider, and on frame 10, I'm gonna animate it so we get something like this, like a squashed effect. Okay. So what's gonna happen, as you can see on the perspective view, is as the gift falls down, we get this very nice stretched effect. Now, as you can see, this stretch effect actually pushes the gift down, which is not what we want. So I'm gonna have to go to my main curve and bring this thing up so that the base of the gift remains right there. There's more fancy ways to do this, but again, I'm just trying to keep this simple. So now what we have is this: the gift falls, stuck to the ground, and even on frame, well, it's stuck on the ground, and pretty much like immediately after it touches the ground, it's gonna squash, right? So we're gonna go into squash mode like this. And also, as you can see here, we need to move the ground plane so the gift remains as close as possible to the ground. So as you can see, this is what happens. We go boom, boom, squash, and then we would expect another stretch, right? So immediately after this squash, probably like a couple of frames, in this case, I'm gonna do 3 frames after this squash, I would expect another big stretch, but not as big as the first one. So this one is like, let's do 1.1, because this one was 1.2, so 1.1. And of course, we're gonna have to grab this thing right here and push it up so that it remains on top of the floor. So this is what we get. It falls, squashes, goes back, and then I would expect, again, probably like 3 frames for this to squash down to like a 0.8, maybe a little bit less. Again, not as intense as the first time. So something like that. We grab the curve, we bring it down. Want it to touch the ground like that, and there we go. So as you can see, this is what we get. The gift falls down stretched, it squashes, stretches, squashes, and then we can stretch it again, but give it a little bit more time. So let's go 24. We're gonna go now to the squash again. Let's do 1.05. Maybe that's a little bit too much. 1.02. Maybe just one. One is even too much. There we go. Something like this. Push it up. And same amount, like this were 6 frames, so let's give it another 6 frames. And it will go down into a squash. Again, not as intense. Every time we do this, the intensity of the squash and the stretch is reduced a little bit. Something like that. We're gonna go boing, boing, boing. And then we definitely need a recovery phase where the squash goes back to normal, right? So like 0, we get a moment to visualize or to appreciate the gift. This boing, boing, boing. It rotates a little bit so we can rest a little bit. We've talked about this with modeling and sculpting. If you have action going all the time or you have a lot of detail everywhere, it becomes difficult for our brains to process what's going on. So having a balance, a contrast between action and rest is really, really, really important for pretty much everything. So there we go. Now, I do think the rotation is a little bit too much, and here's a very cool thing about animation inside of Maya. Since the rotation was only moved on this frame right here, what I can do is say, hey, instead of 200 or 445, let's do 220, which should be pretty much the same distance, but it's going to be a less intense effect. And now, if we play this, you can see that, okay? We get the very nice doink, doink, doink. I think I still want like a final like toink before we go in there, because the first ones look a little bit fast actually. If you take a look at this, the first ones look a little bit fast, and I don't love that. So here I'm gonna show you how we can modify the timing a little bit. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select the squash curve, which has animation, and I'm gonna select the main curve, which has animation as well. I'm gonna press Shift and right click to select all of these frames, and then I'm just gonna stretch them out a little bit, probably like until frame 54. What this does is it increases the size, but it will move some of the keys from like straight or even numbers to like fragments of a number. So what we need to do there, while still holding both curves, just select all of those and say right click, snap. Those will snap them to a complete number of the frame, and we'll get the same sort of like effect, but a little bit slower overall. It's a really good way to modify things. There we go. Now we have this. It's doing. Now I think it's a little bit slow. So same thing. We just grab all of these guys right here. We compress them a little bit, just a little bit. Right click, snap, and let's see how this looks. Much better. Right now, I definitely see that this final one, like this distance right here, is way too much. So let's bring it closer, like that. So it goes back there, and then that's gonna be our fade option. There we go. Now, what we can do here for the fade option is we could try doing a like a double. Right now, the camera is meeting the GIF, right? Like, what if at the same time that the camera is meeting the GIF is meeting the camera? So they both kind of like collide into this like explosion of colors or like into this fade or something. So I know that the camera has its animation on frame 60. So what I can do is I can go to frame 60 of the GIF, say S as well, and be like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna squash. We're gonna do like a preparation. We're gonna do like a really heavy squash. Bring this down, okay? So we're gonna stay like this, and there's like this is the preparation effect. Now, if we don't want to have the preparation for so many frames, we can go to frame 50, for instance, and say, hey, you know what? Don't want to squash just yet. We want to keep the gift clean. I do have auto keyframe turned on, by the way, so that's why I'm not hitting S every single time. There we go. So we fall, we do our little like squash and stretch, we're rotating, and then we get our like a nice form. And then we do like a preparation. And here, as the camera is going forward towards us, we can do the stretch, kind of like indicating that we jumped, and we could even like stretched towards the camera, like do a really crazy rotation towards the camera. And by frame 70, pretty much have eaten the camera, right? Like the camera should be inside, and we get this. So that's gonna be like our crazy transition. Now let's take a look at the speed of the transition. I think it's fine, but I actually think that this frame right here should be like further out, and then this frame right here we're pretty much gone. We're gonna cut the animation pretty much cuts at the moment we touch the camera, which should be like here. Frame 64 is pretty much the end of the animation. That's the fast fade, but we can see the gift like jumping towards us, right? Now I do see the gift jumping towards us, but I would like it to be here. I'm gonna have to move it to the side and do it like this, so that when we see it jumping, it jumps straight to the camera. See how it's like twisted, and that's because of the next frame. This one right here. This frame right here should be a little bit more straight, so that the previous frames have that. There we go. Cool. So pretty much our animation is gonna end at frame 64, and when we see the full animation, this is what we're gonna get. There we go. Perfect. It keeps the snappiness. We do have a little bit of a relaxed moment, and then boom, the explosion right there. So that's the kind of stuff that you wanna kind of like plan ahead about it and try to make sure that it looks as nice as possible, because that's the kind of attention that you want to grab from your audience, right? So it's like a fraction of a second when there's nothing, and then boom, the GIF starts. Very nice little movement there, and then calm, and finally another snappy moment before we fade into the title. Maybe this will be our Christmas intro for the next couple of weeks. I think that might be a good idea. So yeah, that's pretty much it for animation. Let's save this real quick. There we go. And we need to take a look at rendering. We're gonna go into the rendering section. I know I mentioned that this was probably gonna be a 2 or 3 days like process. I think I'm gonna try to let's just finish it today. Let's just do like the quick stuff right now. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna go here. Well, first we're gonna go to our render settings, and we need to talk about the render calculations that we're gonna do. It's gonna be 2K square because we want to go full HD. So even though it's a square thing, we're just gonna like expand something or give it like a background or something. So it's gonna be 2K, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to specific frames. Let's start frame 0. Let's save this real quick, and I'm gonna go Arnold and render. Render here. There we go. So we render. And this is our frame 0. As you can see, it took 4 seconds to render. Okay, not bad, not noisy, so that's great. Now I'm gonna stop this. I'm gonna go to, let's say, frame 18, which is one of the frames where there's a lot of action, and we render again. And we take a look at how long it takes for this to render. And this says it took 4 seconds as well. We take a look at the quality. Not bad. I think it's a nice quality. But here I can definitely tell that there's a little bit of issues here. So this is where we might need to go. Let's get rid of a wireframe and shaded. I'm gonna go to the camera panels, look to selected. Actually, I'm gonna go to like perspective view. And I'm gonna select the main curve right here, the movement curve. And we might need to go to the main curves right here. Let's go to our right view to make sure that this thing is always like touching the ground in the most, like in the nicest way, especially the box. I don't care too much about the ribbon being underneath the floor, but the box definitely needs to be up. Like here, I know there's overlap. We could fix it. Like if you want to make sure that this is always underground, we can definitely fix it. We're gonna have to pretty much go frame by frame. For instance, that frame right there, and where we see a change on the position. For instance, here we might need to bring it down. It's not really gonna change the animation that much, but you might need to do this. This is one of those like super specific tweaks that you might need to do to make sure that the gift always looks like it's on the floor, right? Fine, 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 fine. Here, you can see it kind of jumps a little bit, jumps a little bit, jumps a little bit, jumps a little bit. One of the important ones that we definitely want to keep close to the ground. Go. Then there's a squash. Definitely want to keep on the ground as well. Then boom, that one we don't really care anymore. So now if we take a look at the camera, panels look selected. Again, the animation should be pretty much the same thing. It's just that we made sure that the ground is always there. Like the gift is always like hugging the ground in this case. Okay. So now if we take a look at the animation here again on this frame, we render, you can see how nice this looks. Now I am aware that the animation might need a little bit more help on the samples. So I'm going to go to Arnold Render. I'm going to turn on adaptive sampling. You can see we're at 3 right now. I'm going to enable this. I'm going to change this to 6, which is double the amount of samples. It will probably double the amount of render time. So right now it was 4 seconds. And in this case, it's going to be like 10 seconds, 15 seconds maybe. But I prefer to have a really clean one. As you can see, we really don't need as many or as many samples. So probably like 4 samples in this case is more than enough. But especially since it's a short animation, I think we can afford to render this like, let's say 10 seconds, right? 10 seconds of rendering time, just to ensure that we get a really, really clean render. So that's it. Now, to render the full animation, well, again, it's important to go to a couple of places along the animation just to make sure that the lights and everything look good for you, or as nice as possible to what you want, right? And then at the end, we'll just render the sequence. I am a little bit curious about these ones, like the ones that are really close to the camera. Looks good. You can see this is a little bit more complex because we're seeing more texture and stuff. So, but that looks good. And then finally, frame 64. This one's going to be an interesting one because technically we're inside of the gift. So it should be dark. There we go. It is dark. So ray tracing and light or path tracing and everything working exactly as expected because there's no light inside of the box, right? So that's it. Our animation is working fine. So we're going to go to our settings. We're going to go common, and we're going to say that we want to export this. JPEG should be fine. We don't need to do any like crazy stuff, to be honest. We're going to do name, number, and extension. This is very important. And here we're going to say we want to go from frame 0 to frame 64. As you can see, it's going to save it on my project. That's why it's very important to save your project. It's going to save it with the name of your file. So in this case, it's gift 2022.000064, all of the animations, and we hit close. And now we go to the little eye icon over here, and we say render camera 1. I always do one test render just to see or to make sure that we have something. In this case, we're not going to see anything because we're in frame 64. That's my bad. Let's just wait for this to render. As you can see, this render view inside of Maya is going to take a little bit longer. It might even like create a hiccup there because it actually renders with Arnold and then brings it back to Maya. What the hell is that? Huh. That's really weird. Did you guys hear that? Sorry. Weird noise. I think I received a message and that's really interesting. So yeah, let me go back to frame like 53. That's fine. And let's just do another quick render here. Again, it's going to take a little bit longer. My voice might sound a little bit weird or the video might look a little bit weird, but there we go. So now that I know that this is working, I'm going to go to render sequence. Click this little box right here. You can see that the frame range is right here. This is very important. And do not forget, this is super important. I've forgotten about this and then I come back later and it's the wrong render. Do not forget to select the current camera to the camera that you're using. In this case, camera 1. So now I just need to do render sequence and close, or render sequence. And as soon as I hit this button, Maya is going to go back to frame 0. It's going to render, save, and it's going to do this for the 64 frames. It's similar to a batch render. It's not a batch render per se, but it's similar to a batch render. And this is the option that we have as indie subscribers or as students to render without the watermark. Because if you try to render with a batch render, you're going to get a watermark. Batch render is used a little bit more when you have like a render farm and you have multiple computers doing this for you. This, again, for our purposes, it works exactly the same. So yeah, I think since we're already running a little bit late, guys, and I do want to like have enough time to talk about the last little things inside of After Effects, I think I'm gonna stop the video right here, and tomorrow we'll continue with the render sequence. Also, don't forget that this weekend we have our portfolio review. So if you watch all the way to the end, then that means that you are a very diligent student and that you might be interested in reviewing, or for me reviewing your work. Make sure to submit it so that I can review it at this weekend. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Have a great day. Don't forget to share, subscribe, leave us a like, a comment. All of those things really help the channel. and I'm always really appreciative of that. So thank you very much, guys. I'll see you back on the next one. Bye bye.